Well, good morning. I want to welcome all of you to this power session. I'm Dave Beam, and today we are going to be looking at the subject of creating a great business and life. You may say, well, I don't own a business, so am I in the right place? Well, let's say a great work life and a great personal life. You could look at it that way. In other words, we're looking today at alignment, how to make all this come together and work together and what you want to create. So I welcome you. I'm going to give you a disclaimer here as we start. This will challenge you to your core, and I'll do it in a kind and a gentle way, but I'm going to ask some very probing and interesting questions. So I hope you're here to be coached today and to be helped. And again, I'm just so glad to be with you. So this is me. I've been married for 37 years. Connie and I are getting ready to go on a little 3-day getaway after today. So I'm looking forward to that. We just enjoy each other and have a wonderful marriage. I have 3 sons that are grown and functional. So I rejoice in that. I am the self-proclaimed granddaddy of all granddaddies. And that is a fun, that's a fun role to take. I've been serving in this community for about 25 years in a lot of different capacities. And so I enjoy a lot of different things that I do. I have been a business life coach, success coach, leadership coach, whatever you want to call it, for about 19 years. And I'm also a certified biblical counselor. So I do a lot of marital counseling and personal issue counseling through our church, and I have a passion to help people. So that's who I am. That's what I'm about. And I always do that at the beginning because when I'm listening to somebody for an hour or so, I kind of want to know who I'm listening to. So that's me. Let's move on to the rules of the game. If you've been hanging out at our power sessions, or you know me or have been around me at all, you've seen these. That's part of the challenge is you've seen these and you may say, oh, I already know what's coming here. I'm going to ask you to do something for me this morning and just take that whiteboard and take that eraser and just rub it across that whiteboard and let's just calm down here for a minute, even though it's early in the day and it is Friday. I'm sorry, it's Wednesday. It's my Friday because I'm getting ready to go on that vacation. But let's just kind of settle and let things clear and not have a lot of things that we know right now and just be curious and interested. And the first rule that I want you to embrace, and we're going to spend a few minutes really talking about this piece again today, because I think it's cornerstone to really, it's foundational to all these principles. I want you to embrace an ownership mindset. And specifically, what I want you to own here is your presence today. You are here. So if you're multitasking right now, or you have your mind distracted by a lot of things, I had a person that I trained with once that was kind of the leader of the group. She got up and said, just imagine your desk full of all kinds of papers and distractions and all these other things going on. She said, just open those desk drawers and take your arm and your hand and just scrape all that stuff and just scrape it and just pull it and put it in those drawers and close those drawers so that you can have a nice clear mind and a clear desk this morning. I want to encourage you, if you want to get the most out of this morning, that you need to own the situation. You need to own your presence. You need to own what's going on right now. And that means set up yourself in your mind to be in an environment where you can really be clear and focused. The second thing is, now that I'm clear, I'm prepared. I'm ready to participate 100%. I would have a piece of paper and a pen if you're in a place where you can write. I don't I'm not a great note taker, but what notes sometimes help me do is help me focus and track. But some keywords, even if you take those notes and discard them after you're done, just that other way of engaging yourself and participating will help you get the most out of today. Third, I already talked about it. Let's wipe off the whiteboard, get rid of what we know, and just be curious and interested right now. That's what I'm asking for, is just an openness to possibility. And finally, all that adds up to some fun. It's joyful and glorious when you just become a little kid again. You become curious. You're just going to play the game. You're going to participate, and in the present moment, you're owning life, and you're owning your emotions and your thoughts and your feelings, and you're choosing, keyword, to focus on the task at hand. The task at hand is aligning our lives, the business part of our life, the work part of our life, the family part of our life, the pleasure part of our life, all the different things that enter in. And it's a busy life for most people these days. It's a hectic life for a lot of people. A lot of people use the word with me called overwhelm. And I say this: overwhelm is a state of mind. So we're going to work on your thinking this morning. What you do with what you learned today is really where the change happens. This is preliminary. This is foundational to that. Once you see something today, once you have one of those light bulbs go off, once something clicks with you and you see it, capture it. That's the participation piece. Capture it. Say, I want to write that down, or I want to file that in my mind in a certain place to come back to it, so that I can figure out what I can do about that, because it's in the action, it's in the doing that the transformation and change really occurs. So I'm going to start off as a good coach with a question for you. I'm going to give everybody a moment or two here to think about the answer to this question. What do you want from this session? This session is basically the next 40 or 50 minutes. Over the next 40 or 50 minutes, what would make this worth your while? What would you like to take away from this? You know, we go to the store and we have a list. We say, well, this is what I'm going to look for. So our minds, it's very interesting on how our minds work. When we have lists and we write things down and we kind of think before we go, we're proactive. We set our little biocomputer in our mind, our brain, to look for something. That's my question right now. What are you looking for out of this today? Maybe a little entertainment, maybe just a break, maybe a chance to think a little bit. Hope we can go a little bit beyond those things and say, I would like to walk out of here with a commitment to align and harmonize my life, that I've got all these things on my plate, and I need to get clarity and maybe get rid of some things, and maybe add some things, and certainly adjust some things. I would like to come out of this, Dave, with a plan on how to do that, or a action to take on how to do that. I think that would be a great thing to say you would like to have out of this session. Certainly, I think that's possible. So what do you want? I'll give you a minute just to think about that. What do I want from this session? What would be a great outcome for me from this session? Okay. With that thought in mind, let's move to this first distinction. I love to talk in distinctions. I think our mind is set up to process that way, that once we get a distinction, we really understand it, like light and dark. People know the difference. Day and night, they know the difference. Up and down, north and south, left and right, happy and sad. We know intuitively once we get it, life and death. Once we understand the difference between two things, we would say we get it. Well, this is a distinction here that is transformational. That if you want to have a successful or a great life and business together, I absolutely think this distinction is critical. Owner versus victim. Now, the bad news is I think the default mindset is victim. And I'm going to say something that you may disagree with right now, which is fine, but I hope you would just set aside your I know and find this interesting. We are all victims. What do I mean by that? We all think like victims. Somewhere in our life, somewhere in our business, somewhere in our family, somewhere in our own personal evaluation of ourselves, we think like a victim. We are not taking full accountability and responsibility and ownership, but we're abdicating that to an excuse, or it's somebody else's fault, or it's circumstances, or it's things that are out of my control, or whatever. And all those things can be valid, but when we become a victim with them, what we say is, I cannot do anything about that. I am straitjacketed, I am handcuffed, I just can't do any better. Here's where I hear a lot of victim talk nowadays. Some of you may relate to this in terms of hiring employees. This is just an example. Dave, it's just too hard right now to find people that want to come to work, that want to work hard, and blah, blah, blah. And you know, is it true that the marketplace has changed since COVID? And we've got a younger generation that doesn't fully embrace work ethic like older generations have. All that's true, but that's just information. When I take that information and I draw up a story, a victim story, that now I'm stuck with that. I can't do anything about that. I can only go so far because of that. In other words, I impose a limiting belief on myself based on circumstances, or based on other people, or based on things outside of me. I have become a victim to those circumstances and situations. I get kickback. What if those are true dynamics? You know, you're just, Dave, in some kind of denial here if you're not saying that's difficult. I'm going to go back to the point of trying to find good people in a business, trying to hire good people. I often ask people when they say, I just can't find a good person. And I've got this one person that's not working very well, and I probably need to let them go, or I need to make a change, but I'm afraid they do some work and I just can't find anybody to work. That is just victim talk. I usually ask them, well, how many good people do you need? And well, one or two. I said, so you're telling me in this whole universe, this whole world, there aren't two people that could work for you that could do a good job? The fact is, you haven't put the effort in and owned it to really do what's necessary to find that person, or to create a business that would attract that kind of person. That's the shift from being a victim to an owner. And that's just one example. So I've got a slide that I use all the time to kind of illustrate it. And many of you have seen this, maybe everybody on the call has seen this, but that is the most important part of this slide, the line of distinction. There's the upper part of the slide and the lower part of the slide. Below the line, there is blame. If you can guess, that's a victim mentality, somebody else's fault. If I'm going to get this alignment between my business and between my personal life and my values, while I'm blaming somebody else, I'm not going to get that alignment. I have what, an excuse. I just don't have enough time. That is a victim statement. It's George's fault. That's a victim statement. Or I just can't deal with it. It's too much for me. I'm overwhelmed. There's no point in doing anything about it. In fact, things are not that bad. I don't need to worry. I just don't need to deal with it. I'm just going to sit back and just take it easy and just hope things work out. And maybe they'll get it together, maybe they won't. And you just become kind of apathetic and don't care. That's victim as well, where you just give up, you just give in. You just say, I'm just not going to do anything about it. That's all below the line. It's not wrong to be below the line. It's very human to be there. And as I mentioned earlier, at some level, I suppose we are all there at times during the day or during the week. Something comes up, and often we will start there and then move up above the line. Above the line, we have ownership, accountability, and responsibility. That's where I get up off the couch and do something. That's where I use my ability to respond. I respond in my head. I think about it. I consider it. I sometimes analyze it. I consider it. And then I'm accountable. That's more about my actions. I take measurable activity and then experiment and see what the outcome is going to be. That's being accountable. Overall, the umbrella term is ownership. And so we've got victim and we've got owner. And I hope you can see the distinction. That's what the important part right now is in this presentation, is that you can somewhere sense the difference between being an owner and being a victim. You can look in this slide as a mirror and you can say, oh, I'm being an owner there, or, oh, I'm being a victim there. The key of having this life harmony and success is in taking ownership of your life. It's in shifting your mind to that understanding and that belief. So how do you know if you're above or below the line? Well, a great way to figure that out and to analyze that is to listen to your language. So let's look at some distinctions between how an owner talks and the words an owner uses and the words a victim use. And again, we're on both sides of the column, but let's just look at this first one. An owner says, I own my results. A victim says, I blame you. Something doesn't go right with my family, with my spouse, with my children. Well, I blame them instead of owning the results in my family or in my business. I'm accountable. I'm willing to be measured. I'm willing to be transparent versus I'm in denial. I'm going to hide out and just not deal with it. I'm responsible. I'm going to use my ability to respond. I'm an agent that can make choices versus just make excuses about why I can't get it done. I choose to versus I have to. Now, what you're going to start to notice is a tonality that goes with these words. I choose to do that. I have to do that. I choose to exercise. I have to exercise. I choose to get in shape. I have to get in shape. I choose to learn. I have to learn. I choose to go to that class. I have to go to class. I have to go to work, or I choose to go to work. You can see it's the same activity. It's two different sets of words, two different sets of thinking. I can, I can't. I get to versus I got to. That one is a lot of fun. That one's a lot of fun. I get to pay my taxes. I've got to pay my taxes. Isn't that an interesting one? Think about the difference in thinking between I get to pay taxes versus I've got to pay taxes. One is I'm a victim. The other is it's a privilege. It's a blessing. I live in a place where I have all kinds of services and help and safety. And I, as an owner, I get to pay for that. I get to contribute to that versus I've got to. Isn't that interesting? I shall do it. I should. I've always said should is bullshit. In other words, I should do this. I should do that. That's just beating yourself up. That's just putting yourself down. And that's just sitting back and whining about what's not happening and what you're not doing, what you ought to do or should do, and feeling guilty. None of that fixes it. None of that helps. It hurts you, it hurts those around you. So move from the should, get out of the should, and move into the shall. I shall do it. I would love for you to leave this meeting, this little meeting today that we're having, with the idea there's some things that you're gonna choose to do. You don't have to do them, but you're gonna put them down on paper and say, I shall do that. Not done it before, but I'm choosing to do it. I shall do it. I get to do it. I can. I'm responsible. I'm accountable, and I'm going to own my results. And I'm going to say, here now, here, this is what I'm doing versus what can I do? It's just so hard, Dave. So hard. I don't know what I can do. Moving from that mentality to here's what I'm going to do. It's choosing even the smallest step, even the little thing that you can do to break the momentum, the synergy. Like, you're just sitting there and you're not moving, and bodies at rest tend to stay at rest. It's inertia. To break that inertia, I have to take action. So here's the action I'm going to take, versus sitting in the victim mentality and saying, I don't know what I can do about that. So those words give you some sense of that distinction between owner and victim. So when I say, what's the opposite of north? You say south, and you get that. And I say, what's the opposite of life? And you say death, and you get that. Hopefully now I say, here's an owner. What's the antithesis of owner? Victim. I get the difference between the two. I now recognize the difference, and I can start to tell from my words whether I'm owning it or whether I'm a victim. Key distinction if we're going to get this alignment done between business and life. Here's a second key. If I'm going to align my personal life, my family life, my social life with my business life, I need to begin with the end in mind. This comes from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. It's one of the 7 habits. Begin with the end in mind. Now, this is where we get a little heavy, but I still want to keep a smile on our face, and I want to think about it because it's true that we're all going to come to an end. And 100 years from now, most people on the earth, if not everyone, won't even remember who you were. So we all take ourselves so seriously, and this is a serious matter. But the fact is, if you're going to get this alignment and get your life lined up and really cooking on all cylinders and working together well and harmonized, you need to go to the end and then move back to changing things now to align with that direction you want to go. So how do you go to the end, Dave? How do you begin with the end in mind? How do you get the end in mind? Covey in his book suggests that you go to an event, that you go there in your head before you actually go there. An event where you're going to be stiff as a board in the box. In other words, your life is past and you're ready to be put into the ground. And here's the point. As you go to that event in your mind, there are going to be various people that are going to speak at that event, and they're going to talk about their relationship with you, and they're going to talk about their experience with you. And if you go to this event in your mind, and this might be one of the things you walk away from today that you're going to do, you're going to sit down and go through this little exercise. You're going to listen, first of all, to somebody that you worked with, maybe a good friend or somebody that you partnered with and worked with most of your life. What would they say about your life that was good? What would they say about your life that was a blessing? Think about that statement. We're beginning with the end in mind. At the end of my life, somebody that I work with stands up and they start to talk about me, what are they going to say? Somebody from the community that I've worked with is going to come up to the microphone or up to the front of the room and talk to the group about me, perhaps with some tears in their eyes, perhaps with a smile on their face. They're going to remember me and they're going to say, here's what I remember about Dave. Put your own name in there. Somebody from your church that you worshiped with, that you served the Lord with, is going to come up at that event and talk about your spirituality and your values and who you were as a person serving with them. Somebody that's a friend of yours that was closer, just so close to you. You had great long chats with and talks with, and they probably knew you as well as anybody. What are they going to say about your life? And then finally, members of your family, perhaps a spouse, a child, a close uncle or aunt, a grandmother, they're going to stand up and they're going to say something about your life. They're going to share what you meant to them. Here's what we need, folks, if we're going to align our lives, if we're going to get this alignment between our business life and our work life and our social life and our spiritual life and our physical life, how are we going to get this all lined up? We have to have something to point to. We have to have something that's going to be a center or a gravity. We have to have a point to plan from. Covey says, go to the end. Go to your funeral and listen. What would you want that person from work to say? What would you want that person that you served with in church to say about you, or in the community, or in your family, or the friends that you have? Whatever that is, that's what we want to start to align around. We want to begin this work with the end in mind. That's something you may need to do. If you're not sure what you would want people to say about you, or how you want to make a difference, or how you want your life to make a difference, this is a good place to start. The first place is to own it, to be an owner and not a victim. And then as an owner, what I need to own is I need to go to the end and look at my whole life and own it. I need to take responsibility and accountability for my life. And what am I going to be accountable to? What am I going to be responsible for? Well, I need to define that. And that gets defined when I think about what really is important to me, what I would want people to think and say about me. Here's another way to look at it. This is also in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you're gathering from this something that maybe I recommend that book, I definitely think it's a classic. I think it's a great book. Covey talks about identifying our center. So here's my coaching question at this point in our meeting this morning. What is the gravitational center of your life? We know what the gravitational center of our solar system is. It's the sun. The sun is what everything revolves around. In your life, in terms of priorities and what's most important, what is it that's most important to you? What is the priority? It's a very similar question to beginning with the end in mind, but it's a little different approach. Let's look at some potential centers, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 here you would identify with more than others. Some people are very spouse centered. That significant other person in their life that they said I do to and made that lifelong commitment to is they live like a planet circling around that center point. They live a life that's centered around their spouse's happiness, their spouse's well-being. We're not drawing any value judgments on whether that's good or not good. We're just trying to identify the different things that people put in the center of their life as most important. Here's another one, family. It may be your children. They may really be the most important thing in your life. And you, everything in your life, everything you do every week, all the schedules and all the running and all the effort is all about that family. Or maybe you're in this season of life that I'm in, and grandchildren tend to go to the middle for a lot of folks, that those grandkids, I'll even move my house, I'll move where I live to be with them or to be closer to them. And their happiness and their future is all that matters to me. That possibly would be the center for some of you. Maybe it's money. Some people, it's all about the dollar. I know a lot of folks that went through the Depression. Sometimes they're just they have a lot of money fear, and sometimes the things that we're afraid of, capture our center. But money driven people, and most money driven people that have money as a center, it's never enough. They set goals, and it's all about the retirement, and it's all about security, and it's all about not being without. Work. We've all known them. You may be one. Workaholics. In other words, the only thing they really have in life is their work. And they're so identified with their work that they really don't have any very much else going on. They work day and night, night and day. Now, I agree that's a little bit of an older center. I don't see as many people sold out to their work these days. There seems to be a shift in the culture that's not looked on. At one time, that was looked on as being very noble, to really be somebody who was sold out to their work, to their vocation. Possessions. The next boat, the next house, the next car, the next toy, the next thing in your hobby, something you can touch, something you can feel, something you can buy typically, but you are centered around your home, your house, or your vehicle. Your life is all about what you own. Or pleasure. There are many people that live for the joy of just feeling good. They will seek out any kind of medication, any kind of drug, any kind of treatment that will remove any discomfort and pain. The pleasure-centered person absolutely forbids pain to be in their life. Unfortunately, it can lead to addiction in some cases. It can certainly lead to self-centered living. A pleasure-centered life is not probably the best center to have. Now, I want you to look back through what we've got so far: spouse, family, money, work, possessions, pleasure. Those aren't bad things. Within themselves, they're neutral. But do you want them to be the sun of your life, the gravitation of your life? Church. Some people are so caught up in their religious community that that's all they think about. That is the center of their existence. It's all the activities, all the youth activities, all the services, all the focus of their money, their time, and their efforts. It's a 24/7, 7 days a week, church-centered life. And there are friend-centered lives. That being with my friends, having that social interaction with other people becomes the center. This one's sad. I really do. There are some people that all they think about is the competition or the enemy or some hurt they've had from the past. And their life is all defined and revolves around that person that they resent or that they hate or that they're afraid of. And their whole life is centered around an enemy or getting back at that person or proving something to that person. And then finally, this one, which I'm sure we can all relate to, is ourselves. The narcissist, the person that completely sees everything in light of how it relates to them. This would be the typical 2-year-old. There's life and there's me, and I'm about what it's all about. And there are people that never seem to really grow much from that mentality, that they relate everything to themselves. Now, again, is it good to take care of yourself and your spouse and your family? Is it good to earn money and have a good work and to enjoy some possessions and some pleasure and have friends and even deal in a right way with your enemies, and certainly to worship God in a covenant community of people that love Christ. Church, I love church, and self, we need to take care of ourselves. So none of those things within it, I would say, is a bad thing necessarily. But when it becomes the center, if we begin with the end in mind, do we want to build our whole existence and identity around any one of those things? What what he recommends in his book that you consider is principles. The difference between principles and all those other things is they don't come from you. These are self-evident truths that just is the way the universe operates. This is just truth out there that is objective truth. And I'll give you an example, the law of reciprocity, that what you put out is basically what you get back. That what you give typically is what returns to you. Now, that's not a 1-to-1 ratio all the time, but that's just a principle of life that's true. That when I'm kind to others, I usually get kindness back. When I listen, people typically listen to me. When I respect other people, they tend to respect me. Those are some principles in life that work. Some other principles are the principles of agriculture and the farm, that there's a time to sow seed, there's a time to water and to wait, there's a time to harvest, and then there's a time in the winter to back off. That's a principle. And here's what the lesson here, folks, is. Those principles are foundational and they don't change. If I will take the time and the commitment in my life to learn what those foundational things are, and I make those things that do not change my rock and my center, then all these other things can be aligned around these unchanging principles, and that lends itself to great integrity and stability. If I go to the end of my life with the end in mind, if I've built my life on principles and truth, then these other things will be aligned and they'll be prioritized and harmonized. Now, I'm talking in perfect terms. None of us are there perfectly. We struggle at times. We're in and out of this, but this is a time this morning to just consider, what is your center? Identify your center. This is some of those things that you tend towards. How could you maybe move some of those out to the periphery and put a principle there in place? That's what I want you to see there, because if you want this life work balance and harmony, you have to get clear on what's going to be in the center, what's going to be the driving force. So I like the tree. I think it illustrates this whole thing we're talking about very well. And here's some real common sense things I could say. If I want apples, I'm going to plant an apple tree, which means I need apple seeds. So we're talking about having a harvest in our life. We're talking about having fruit in our life. What is the thing that we want our life to count for, beginning with the end in mind? The apple tree, if they did the begin with the end in mind, the apple tree would say, well, I would want everybody to stand up at my funeral and say, boy, he created some great apples. He put out the produce. He put out a lot of apples, and they were high quality. They were sweet. They were great. That's what a tree would want to be at their funeral. That's what they'd want to hear about. So what is the fruit that you want at your funeral? That will determine what kind of tree you want to have. And immediately, so we start with this formula that you've seen on these things that I've done before, be, do, have. We start with the have. And in an apple tree, we want to have apples. In other words, we're saying the results that we want. Are you clear on the results that you want to produce in your life, that you want to produce in your business, that you want to produce in your family, that you want to produce in your service to your community and to your church? Do you have clarity on the result that you want? If we're going to plant something, we need to know what kind of seed we need, and to know the kind of seed we need to know the result we want. If you plant onions, you're not going to get apples. And if we don't plant anything, we're going to get a bunch of weeds. If all the other seed just comes from everywhere else and we go below the line and we're a victim, then everything in the culture just feeds our soil. And that's what we reap, is a lot of weeds, a lot of chaos, and a lot of confusion. So this is about owning it. This is about owning what I want and what I want to have, and then doing something about it. So going to the other part of the tree, to the roots, if we're going with the Covey model, we want those roots to be rooted, our root to be rooted in principles. That means some study, folks. That means some reflection, some meditation, some thought, some conversation, some coaching, some spirituality, some looking at what is intangible in life. That takes some effort and some focus. Otherwise, whatever gets thrown in the ground is what comes up. So what are you rooted in? What principles are the most important to you? Most of you know me, that you've been around these for a while. I'm a Bible guy. I'm a Jesus guy. I'm somebody who loves the Lord. I've been saved, and my principles are rooted there. And that's what I go back to. That's the center. And that's what drives and aligns everything in my life, because I want the result of being a good and faithful servant before my Creator. That's my goal. So with that goal in mind, and I have principles that will drive that. What do we need? What's this all about? Well, if we don't get up off the couch and out of bed and go to work, nothing happens. So I need to take action. And I like to put daily action. It's about what I do today that matters. Everything we're talking about today all comes down to today. It all comes down to, what am I going to do today? How do I choose what's best today? How do I make the best choices that are going to lead to the results I want? Well, that's what this is about today. I have to begin with the end in mind, and I have to act accordingly. There's a process there. These principles need to influence what's important to me, my values. I need to root my values in those founding principles that don't change, and then create some mission or some purpose in my life that's going to be around what's important to me, which is rooted in principle. If you see that as the root system, that's amazing. That's stability. We don't want any of that to move. For a tree to be strong, it has to be flexible at the top. It has to have some branches and leaves that move and come and go. But we want that root system to be deeply rooted and strong. And in this model, that's the principles that I hold to, the unchanging truth that I hold to. I root my values in that and my mission in that, my purpose. I've got a purpose that's really clear and stable. And out of that, I build a business. Out of that, I have a family. Out of that, I serve in the community in my church. This is where this all is rooted. And so if you see, there's only some space left here in between the action, choosing that daily action, and all this mission, values, and principles. How do I clarify that? How do I translate that root system into that fruit? Well, this is just a model. I need to every year reflect and set some specific goals. Every 90 days, I need to break those goals down into some clear pieces. And then every week, pull out 1 or 2 priorities for each day that is aligned with that mission, values, and principles that's clarified by those rocks and goals. And if I have real clear priorities every week that I'm committed to, that's where the commitment kicks in. It's in those weekly priorities. I've only got a couple things every day that I'm committed to. Now, that sounds weird, doesn't it? Dave, you don't understand. I have multiple commitments. I have all kinds of things. That's why you're overwhelmed and struggling. You need to really find out what the very most important things aren't always the most urgent things. And that's what you need to be acting on every day first. All that other stuff will happen, and you've certainly got a lot more to do. But if you're getting those most important actions taken that are lined up with your mission, values, and principles by setting priorities, rocks, and goals, then I'm going to have the result that I want to have. And that's a system there. And I'm giving it to you like a fire hose. I'm giving it to you a lot at once. But if you can see that, just that one picture, that's how to do it. You say, how do I do this? It's right there in that chart, if you can see it. I'm going to go through the steps very quickly. I will email this presentation to you. Just email me and ask for it, and I'll give you these instructions. So I'm just going to read through these. I'm not going to take time to explain each one. It's just a review of what we just said. Number one, for those of you that like linear stuff and points and bullet points and instructions, here you go. Establish your values. That's beginning with the end in mind, that are aligned with those unchanging principles. Second, declare a life mission that's aligned with those values. This will work in a business as well. Third, each year set specific goals that are aligned with your mission. And then each quarter, clarify 3 to 5 rocks that are aligned with your goals. And then each week, choose the priorities that are aligned with the rocks. You kind of see how we're breaking it down into individual pieces where it becomes doable. Then each morning, choose and commit to completing specific actions that day selected from the list of the priorities. So every Sunday afternoon, I'm sitting down and I'm figuring out what the priorities for the next week are. I'm not thinking of the whole week and everything I have to do, but I'm coming up with approximately 1 to 2 things every day that are going to be most important, aligned with my mission, that's aligned with my values, that's based in principles. Okay. So I've done this work, and now I'm down to these weekly priorities that I'm setting. And then in the morning of every day, I go to that list of priorities for the week and I say, which 1 or 2 am I going to do today? And I commit to that. And I say, this day is successful when I get that to-do list done, TWO, 2 things, not 20 things. There's a whole lot of other things I'm going to do in the day. Don't get me wrong. That's life. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on in life. If I got a business, a family, a church, a community, I got all kinds of junk happening all day long. But I got 2 things that I'm committing to, that I'm going to own, that I'm going to say, I own my life today because I'm going to get those 2 most important things done today, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. Folks, if you did that, your end is going to it's going to end the way you want it to end, because your life is going to be consistently based on that direction that you owned and chose, that was aligned with those values and those principles. I hope you're seeing it. And then every evening before I die for that day, and then I get to be born again the next morning into a new life every day. But every evening I can celebrate the fact that I completed those 2 things. That is how I enjoy success. I don't wait until I get the big goal accomplished for the year. I enjoy the success and the beauty and the presence of every day getting those 2 priorities done, because I know I've chosen well. That's the model. That's the way it works on paper. How it works out in life is you practice it and you become better at it, and you experiment and you fail and you get better and you get up and you dust yourself off. But now you've got a formula. Now you've got a plan. Now you've got a template. Now you've got a way to think about it. So one last slide here to kind of pull this together. Destination. That little arrow there going to the right represents your life. So on the left, we have your past. We've talked about people that center their whole life around their past. Maybe you've got some issues there. You've got some baggage. You've got some things that are holding you back there that you're captured with. We've got the present. That's this moment with me right now. That's this moment right now on this Wednesday, August 31st, 2022. We're right here at this moment together. That's the present. That's today. And then we have a default future. What does a default mean? Default means is where you will typically go without any outside influence. So the default future looks much like the past. So what creates our future? Well, there's a lot of things that enter into it. There's a lot of circumstances and things that we don't control. But from our standpoint, what creates our future is our thinking. Our biocomputer, our brain, which is an amazing organ, it's the most amazing system in the world that's been ever discovered. It directs the activities of our life. And we have the ability to use our prefrontal cortex, which is that cognitive portion, to program that computer. We can program our thinking. So in this present moment, where do I go to get the program and the information for my computer? Most people go to their experience, past experience. Most people go to what's familiar. We've always done it that way. They don't go to new thought. They don't go to creative thought. They don't go to something that's not familiar. They go back to what's comfortable, what's safe. And that's the programming they bring into their present. As a result, what they create is a default future that looks much like the past. Folks, this is why there is mediocrity in the world. This is why there is little growth and sometimes a digression in lives and in businesses and in families and in churches and in communities and in relationships, because we're using the thinking of the past, of our past, which isn't even accurate, by the way, because we don't remember the past accurately. We are selective in our memory, but we've got a story and we tell that story and it develops. And pretty soon that story becomes our identity. That story becomes our belief. That story becomes our reality. And out of that reality, we create our future. We create the direction. We program our biocomputer to take us that way. And so we end up where we've always been. And we say, well, I knew that was going to happen. I'm saying there's an alternative today. If you're listening to me, we can go to the begin with the end in mind to our funeral, and we can get what would we love people to say? What would we love our legacy to be? What would we love our outcome to be? The story of our life. What would we love for it to be versus what it's headed toward, which is about where we are now and where we've been? Well, that's called a created future. This amazing person that we are, that God has made us in his image, we have an ability to go in our minds to where we're not. We can go to the past and we can go to the future. And we can go out to that new created future and we can start to dream again. And we can start to hope. And we can start to desire for things to be better than what they are today. And we can actually start to create that picture in our mind. And we can bring that thinking and that picture back to the present and start to program our biocomputer to go on that path and that direction. That's called being an owner, not a victim. I'm not going to be a victim to my past. I'm not going to be a victim to my past thinking. I'm going to choose. I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to use my ability to respond to my circumstances and my context. I'm going to stand up and create something and be proactive and change my direction and move a different way based on principles, based on values, based on goals, based on a thinking that comes out of a created future and not a default future. I hope you see it. I hope you see this and it really inspires you to say, how can I change the path? How can I change my path? What path do I want to be on? What is currently my center of my life, my gravity? What principles do I want to move into that center and start to build a created future that's built on something solid? That's what we're talking about. So I'd like you to take a moment as we end up here today and write down 5 ideas, and more importantly, 5 actions based on those ideas that you are going to take from today. And I'm going to even outline what success looks like right now. Success looks like finding one that you'll actually commit to and do. One thing, here's one thing it may be for you. I'm going to sit down and begin with the end in mind. I'm going to go visit my funeral, and I'm going to think through each of those categories and think about what I would want people to say. That's a way to get started. I'm going to think about how my life is currently out of line. I'm lacking some integrity and some direction. I'm going to call Dave and ask him if he would spend a little bit of time to me talking with me and helping me get clear on these. That would be an action you could take. There's just so many different things. I'm going to sit down with my spouse or my children or my kids that just went into college. And I'm going to talk about some of these principles and help them get their lives aligned and solid on something that's got a strong foundation. Folks, there's so many things you could do and should do. I'm talking about what will you do? What one thing will you take away from here and put into practice? Here's our offers for today. I'll email you a PDF of all these slides just so you can have them to review and think back through this. Second, if you ask me, I've got a set of challenging questions. Oh, it's a whole bunch of them. There's 2 pages. Be glad to send those to you. It just helps stimulate thinking around these things. And my third offer is I'd love to have a conversation on how I might be able to better serve you or your team. That's what I do. That's my calling. That's my vocation. That's what I love to do. If you'd like to do that, that conversation is free, no obligation, and be glad to give you some help there. So that's what we have today. If you've got some questions or you would like to have some of those offers, just email me. That is this email address, davebeam@mentordavebeam.com. So thank you for coming today. We'll see you in about a month. And I appreciate your all's participation. It's been a joy to serve you this morning. Goodbye.